So I know it's kind of been a brutal news cycle here for a while, and it's easy to get pessimistic because it seems as if we're up against odds that can't be resisted, that the administration can impose its desires at will, and everyone and everything just goes along with it, despite constitutional concerns, legal concerns, health concerns, whatever. We seem to be just completely cornered. Now, this is the nature of power structures, is that they appear monolithic. They appear absolutely unassailable, rock solid, and unopposable. Think about how demoralized the people in North Korea must be, and how totally and utterly dependent they are on their government for everything, food and so on. And this is why I narrated the book Dictatorship to Democracy. It's up on my YouTube channel. I suggest you either listen to it, while you mow your grass or whatever, or you can read it yourself. It's about a 90-minute to 2-hour read. It will change the way you look at any sort of institutional structure, any sort of power struggle, and a hierarchy. The main point of the book is power structures are not monolithic. They are full of holes. They have many weaknesses. Authoritarian regimes rely on unthinking cooperation, and when that cooperation is withdrawn, the very stability of the authoritarian power itself diminishes and begins to crumble. And so yes, okay, that's very interesting, but what do? Well, it's become quite clear that symbolic national level action isn't working. There was the Marine who he threw down his rank on the table and said, I demand accountability over the Afghanistan withdrawal. And, that might have worked in the 90s back when we were the United States of America, the Republic of the United States. But since we've been conquered by these non-governmental authoritarians, NGAs, as I'm calling them, we are no longer... The nation is at war with itself. It's globalism versus nationalism, or however you want to define the conflict. We are no longer the United States of America. And unfortunately, this guy is now in jail. And I criticized him for, you got 1 million views on TikTok, but as I said, it's largely symbolic action. And what we need is people that are taking effective action. And think about this poor guy right now sitting in the brig or wherever he's at. Right now, just sitting there, eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, maybe do some push-ups or something. He went from a guy, a patriot, with influence, with position. He had young Marines working for him. He had power in society. He could take care of his family. He had friends. He had contacts. He had people he would talk to all of the time. And now he's in a little tiny cell. That's what they want. He's useless. He's neutralized. The powers that be couldn't be happier that this guy exposed himself as a U.S. patriot and not a globalist shill. We need patriots up and down the hierarchy because there's ways of resisting through non-cooperation that don't necessarily get you thrown in the brig. Now, the Proud Boys, love them, hate them, whatever, I don't care. Think strategically, not emotionally. They tried big, grand, national stage type of events, and, early January was one of those, and we saw how that worked out, because right now the globalist establishment is too powerful. They control too much of the government, almost all of the media, and they were able to craft their own narrative of the insurrection, and it stuck, even though nobody's been charged with insurrection. And so then they tried to, the deep state, globalists, whatever you call it, tried to repeat the process, and of course nobody showed up. There was agents everywhere. They called them glowies because it was so obvious that it was a trap. So what do? You've lost the national stage, right? Well, again, remember this idea of the appearance of monolithic power actually being full of holes. And one of the ways people are pushing back is they've been taking over school boards. And this has been a real thing. Like CRT was big in the news. Now it's not so big. The Proud Boys now are going hyper-local. They're showing up at school board meetings and pushing back on these leftist agenda. Because like I said, I was in a union. I was a union steward. There was, it represented 300 people probably. And there was 3 communists that ran, or 4, that ran that whole Union Hall. They chose the politicians we endorsed, they chose how the money was spent, but they were there every month for an hour, and that allowed them to run and control the Union for the interests of the left. So, step by step, patriots have been showing up at school boards, reclaiming them. Yeah, maybe the superintendent is a mask-wearing, globalist supporting, we are the world, open borders type of guy, but there is millions and millions of people who preferred the American Republic. And by showing up at the local level, you're building this grassroots. You're taking out that monolithic power structure from the bottom up. And again, that's why I criticized this Marine that now ended up in the brig, because he was way up there in the power structure. These globalists really only control a handful, a bare minimum of key positions, but then you have patriots waiting in the wings. It's a form of counter-infiltration to undo the infiltration that's happened with the left after all of these years. And so through this, the Proud Boys are helping these parents push back on mask mandates, push back on the whole critical race thing and the globalist indoctrination stuff to give kids a real education. Kids that learn their nation's history will love their nation. People that love their nation will be nationalists, not globalists. And so you can see how that institutional power, even small institutions, can metastasize. Like you as an individual hearing my voice are not very strong. But you in a community, you in an institution have influence, have power to a degree. And then you have millions of Trump supporters, patriots, whatever, all taking positions of power all across the country. It begins to change the political dynamic in a very real way. And it's not just institutional power, there's cultural power. You see here David Hogg and his anti-gun stuff fades into darkness as millennials embrace Second Amendment. Well, what's going on? Well, gun culture is very strong. People that shoot, people that hunt, people that are interested in home defense, people that just respect the Second Amendment. There's YouTube channels, there's gun clubs, there's magazines, there's all this stuff. And then you had the globalist top-down propaganda, but the culture was able to resist the seemingly monolithic power. Think about how much money was dumped into these David Hogg type things. But the culture overpowered it, and the culture didn't back down. And that's why it's the gun control stuff seems to be now a losing issue. And that's a huge victory because it's a heck of a lot harder to conquer a country with an armed populace. Despite sitting in positions of power, they need to do away with that Second Amendment. So really respect that power of culture. I mean, I like to think about, take like Genghis Khan, great warlord, but it was made possible because of the warrior culture that supported him. Imagine if Genghis Khan suddenly came to Jesus or found peace or Buddha or whatever and didn't want to fight wars anymore. Well, he would have been deposed in a second by his own people and replaced with another warrior. That's what the people wanted. That's what his culture demanded. Now, it's not just individuals, regular poor people like you and me. Companies can make a big difference too. You can see Smith & Wesson here is ditching Massachusetts over legislation and moves its headquarters to Tennessee. So if you're a business, like think of the power. They employ all these people. They're going to take their jobs and they're going to move them somewhere that is going to follow the Constitution, that's going to be patriotic. Now, as a consumer, you may want to consider supporting Smith & Wesson for these moves and boycotting, say, like Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that. You don't have to make a big show of it, but do be aware of where you're spending your money and what these companies are doing, because this institutional power matters. This really shapes what those at the top can do. Remember, the power is not monolithic. It's full of holes. You can see now Australia's corporations are rebelling against government's draconian lockdowns. Companies are pushing back now on the government. Now there's some real power. There's monolithic power against government monolithic power. Well, dictators rely on cooperation. unthinking compliance. And you can see how much more powerful a company is. This is why the school board thing is not a joke, because that is something parents, just parents with a couple of kids or one kid, can go from being isolated individuals to having an influence on their community. That just needs to be multiplied out across the country, and that top part of the monolithic power structure is severely weakened. They can't just pass these dictates anymore. Then you get a culture shift, and when the culture shift, then you get the companies. It's now safe for big corporations to push back, and then the political class has to begin to bend because they need compliance. And if they're not getting it, they risk losing legitimacy altogether. And of course, the authoritarians require the cooperation of the military and the police. And look at this. This is a beautiful example of just peaceful non-compliance. Italian police officers remove their helmets in solidarity with the anti-tyranny, pro-freedom demonstrators. You can give all the orders you want, but what do they matter if nobody follows them? Absolutely beautiful. So you can see how the individual's power can be magnified by taking small institutional power and affecting the cultural power can then affect the bigger institutions, and then those that enforce the authoritarian will stop complying, and then those authoritarians themselves are rendered powerless or far less powerful. The government overreach is then contained. As one of my regular commenters is fond of saying, nobody is coming to save us from these people. Nobody is going to do this for you. You have to look around you, look at your environment, look at your connections to your community, and look at what realistic steps you can take. You need to focus on taking effective action, not just symbolic action, and remember, nobody is going to do this for you.